The purpose of this video is to show the assembly and drawing of exercise 10-30-1. One thing that I want to make note of on this particular piece is if you're having a hard time getting the fillets in, don't stress over it. Sometimes you gotta play with putting in a single fillet versus multiple fillets at the same time. One of the things with Creo is it makes you do things in a very methodical fashion. So if you try it one way and it doesn't work, then try it another way. I actually used 3 different fillets, rounding this piece, followed by the bottom, and then the parts of the rib that were filleted. So we've got this piece, we've got the axle, the base plate, and then the wheel. So having all of these pieces, what I want to do is go to File, New, and I'm going to select Assembly and say OK. Now what that's going to do is it's going to bring up this interface for actually creating the assembly. Now the way that you do this is going to be very, very important. You really have to go through and kind of place things the way that you want them to be. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this button right here, which is Place Component. Once I click that button, I'm going to grab the base plate and then say Open. Now you can see that it's this kind of dull yellow color. The dull yellow color is going to be the default for whatever we bring in. And I'm just going to left click to place this. Okay, now once I've left clicked to place it, now I need to actually go through here and say where I want it to be. I can see right here that it says Status, No Constraints. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click this and I'm going to select Default. Now default is what you're going to use for the first part every single time. And what that does is aligns the planes from the part and the assembly together without actually having to do any additional work. So now I'm going to hit the checkbox to say that I'm done with that piece. Next I want to begin by putting in a bracket. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to click on Place Part. And I'm going to grab bracket and say Open. And I'm going to put this right here. Now after you place it, now is when we need to start actually putting the constraints in for how it's going to be assembled together. Remember, all of this is going to occur within the same command, so if you make a mistake, it's best to just start over and put the object back in. Now I know that I want this bottom face and this face to be lined up. But instead of being aligned, I want them to be mated. That way they always oppose each other. I know that I want this face right here, the one that I have highlighted, to be lined up with this face. Now I don't want this offset in here, so I'm going to change this to no offset. And then the last thing that I need to do is, first of all, turn on my axes, that way I can see them. And I want to line up my axis from my bracket with the axis from my plate. Now you can see that it turns from that dull yellow color into this bright yellow color. That lets us know that it's fully constrained. So I go ahead and hit my checkbox. Now that piece is in. For the second bracket, as soon as I bring it in, it's going to remember the constraints that I placed on the previous one. So I'm going to left click to drop it, and then you can see that it says Mate, Align, and Align. Well, right now it's looking for the first mate, and the first mate is this face. Now it wants the Align, so we're going to click on here for the Align, and now we'll click on the axis to actually line it up. And you can see that I kind of messed that one up a little bit, so I'm just going to cancel that, and I'm going to go right back in here to bracket. Like I said, a lot of times it's easier just to redo it than to try to fix the 1 or 2 that you made a mistake on. So first I need to pick my mate. Next I need to pick that alignment point, which is this face here. And now it's showing me this axis, so it's this axis that I need to line that up with. Once I have that placed, I hit the checkbox. Okay, so now I've got everything in so far that I need to have in. So next I'm going to come in here and place my axle. And I'll say open, and I'll left click to place it into my file. And now I need to locate it. So I'm going to click on the round part and then find an axis that I can select. Or pick any other round part, and I'll pick the inside of this hole. What that's going to do is that's going to kind of line it up about where I need it to be. Next I'm going to click on this face and this face, and I want those, instead of having an offset of 66.87, once you do the math you'll learn that it's approximately 2. So let me go ahead and switch this to 2, and if I look at that it needs to be flipped the other way, or in this case a -2, and that's approximately centered to where I want it to be. And I can also see the etch or finish inserting this piece. Next I'm going to do the wheel. Let me close out some of these windows so that the computer speeds up a little bit. In a lot of cases, if you have a lot of parts open, you'll slow down your system and it has a hard time actually figuring out everything that it is you're trying to do. So let me just close this last one. Okay, now this is the only part I have open, so it should go a little bit smoother from here on out. I do need to make sure that I click activate so that the current window is in use. Next I'm going to go back to place component, and I'm going to grab my wheel, and I'll say open. Left click to place it. First thing I need to do, I'm going to grab a round portion, and I'll grab the round portion of this. That's going to lock those two in together. And now I'll click on this face, swing around and click on this face, set my offset up to be 5, and now I can see that everything is centered and everything is lined up. So I'm going to hit my checkbox, and here I've got my completed caster assembly. And it's going to look kind of bad with all of the reference planes and stuff like that in there, but if you want to take a closer look at it, you can most certainly turn all that stuff off and see exactly what's going on this part. Now I need to save this into the same folder that I have the rest of my file saved into, and now I want to turn back on all of my references. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to take a look at my default planes. This is going to be very important when it comes to doing my drawing. In the requirements for this exercise, I had mentioned that I want a front section view. So what I need to do is look at my default planes. I have a plane that kind of cuts right over through here. I have a plane that is directly on top of my object or very close to it. And I have a plane that is on the front of my part. Well, to do a half section, I need a plane that is going to be lined up in here. Now, while I have multiple planes on multiple parts that are lined up right there, I don't have any assembly planes lined up in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the plane button, and I'm going to select that front plane. And my translation is going to be, I know that the object width at that point is 78, so my translation is going to be 39. Or half of 78. So I'll say OK to that. I now have a plane that cuts this object directly in half. I can now save the file again, making sure that I have all the current update information. And now I'm going to go to File, New, Drawing. I'll select OK, and I'm going to do just B Drawing, and I'll say OK again. Now when all of this comes in, it's going to look really bad. But what I want to do is I want to change this to a section view. So I'm going to double click it, click on Sections, 2D cross section. I'm going to add one. I want it to be planar, so I'll say Done. And I'm just going to name it SECT for section 1. hit the checkbox, and now it's going to ask me for a plane. Now all of those planes that we have on here are only going to be, it's only going to be looking for the actual assembly planes. It doesn't care about any part planes or anything else like that. So that assembly plane right here, the 80TM1 that I created, is the plane that I'm going to be looking to go for. So I'm going to select that and say OK, and you'll see that this turns into a section view. Now I'm going to turn off a lot of this reference geometry and repaint my screen. Now I don't necessarily need this to say section down here, so I'm going to click on annotate, and I'm going to grab this and just delete it because it's unnecessary for what I'm trying to do. Now for the purposes of this drawing file, really all you're going to do is give me overall dimensions. For example, the overall height from the top to the very bottom is 120.239. I'm aware that it's going to come up with something weird. We want dimensions for the different parts that we have in here. So we've got this right here, which is a diameter of 100. The overall width, which would be from here to here, which is going to be 136. Basically, all we're dimensioning is exactly what is going to represent the operating envelope of this particular object. This diameter of 100 actually covers the depth. So here we have the width, here we have the height, and here we have the depth. So this is the information that would be needed for somebody to actually go in and put in the information that they need. Now there's a lot of other things that you can do in here, but the main thing that I want you guys to have is your overall dimensions and a front section view. Once you have all of this done, in addition to the rest of the requirements that I've got, make sure you go to Publish, you're going to select PDF, and then you're going to export, and that's the file that you're going to be submitting.